Good evening. Welcome, welcome. Maybe I'll ask, how is the temperature for you guys? Is it okay? Is it a little bit chilly? Is it a little bit warm? It's okay? Okay. Just because I'm in a place where these are blowing on me, so I'm fine, but I just want to check and see how you guys are. Okay. So welcome, welcome. Nice to see you all. So today I'd like to give a talk about this story that we find in the suttas that, I don't know, I kind of like it. It's a little bit silly. maybe silly is not the right word. But it has these exaggerated portions of it, which I think are kind of fun. Maybe that's the right word, a little bit fun. And we might even ask, like, what is the purpose of having some of these stories that are fun? And I would say, actually, so maybe I'll clarify. So we have the suttas, these kind of like the scriptures, we might say. And then like maybe 1,000 years later, they wrote what are called the commentaries. And the commentaries are where all this very colorful, kind of what we might say like fun stuff comes. So it's not in the earliest strata of literature. It's not from the time of the Buddha, but sometime later as they were filling in the backstory, like, well, why did that happen? And sometimes the backstory is some fantastical thing, as is the case here. And so I'm sharing this just because, I don't know, it kind of makes me smile a little bit, this story. But there's also some really good teachings in here. So it's not just entertainment for entertainment's sake, but it can be entertainment too. But also I like that this idea that, okay, the Dharma doesn't have to be so dry and boring. It can be dry and boring, if that's your thing. There's plenty of dry and boring things in there. But and to be sure, a lot of it, there's these lists, and I actually love the lists. But I want to kind of like highlight that there's more than just lists in these Buddhist teachings. 4 Noble Truths, 8-fold Path, 7 Factors of Awakening, 5 Faculties, 10 Paramis, all these. Okay, so this is a story of the Buddha talking with an ogre. This is how we translate this word yakka, as an ogre. So these ogres, yakkas, they show up in the Pali Canon, just a few times, and they have different roles when they show up. And some of them are depicted as really devout followers of the Buddha, and some are depicted as demons that like to eat humans. And they're not necessarily malicious, but they do eat humans. So, so there's something about that, I guess. But we might see that in the case of this story, I might understand as a rhetorical device or a literary device, and that this ogre asks questions. And it's the answering of the questions where we get some of the teachings. But we might learn something about the questions that get asked. And in the same way, we see lots of humans, as well as if there's going to be any non-humans that show up. And any suttas, they often are asking questions too. So this is the way that I am kind of holding them as just this rhetorical device as a way to provide opportunities for the Buddha to talk about something. So okay, so I'll start with the backstory that comes from the commentary, right? So this is, like I said, like 1,000 years after the time of the Buddha. So the Buddha goes to Alaveka. This is the ogre's name, Alaveka. I kind of even just like to say it, Alaveka. Alaveka the yakka. Yakka is ogre. So, and Alaveka lives in Alavi. So it does kind of have this like fairy tale kind of feeling, right? Even just the names of these people. So the Buddha goes to visit goes to Alavi to see Alavaka the Yucca. And Alavaka is not there. Apparently, he's at a meeting of ogres that's happening in the Himalayas. Just kind of curious. I don't know what the meetings are about, but but the Buddha, he shows up anyway. He goes to Alavaka's place, and he knocks on the door, and I guess Alavaka lives in a really big place. Maybe a mansion or something we might imagine. And the doorkeeper opens the door and says, "The Blessed One has come at an improper time." So it's interesting that the doorkeeper recognizes, oh, this is the Buddha, and just says, this is not a good time. And the Buddha responds, "Yes, but if it would not be burdensome for you, I would like to spend one night here." And this was the case that the monastics, that some of the Buddha's followers, where they would often be traveling and would just stay at people's places. And they would, for alms, they would have food that people would give them in places where they would stay. So this is not an unusual thing to happen. So the doorkeeper says, "Well, it will not be burdensome for me, but that yucca, this ogre, is rough and harsh, and he doesn't even pay homage to his mother and father." So saying he's not going to pay homage to you because he doesn't even pay homage to his parents. He doesn't even respect his parents. But the Buddha isn't fazed. And he says to the doorkeeper, "I know his rough character, but that won't be an obstacle for me. So if it would not be burdensome for you, I would like to spend one night here." And the doorkeeper responds, "It would not be burdensome for me, but the yucca is like a hot frying pan. He does not have regard for his mother or father or for recluses and Brahmins or for the Dharma. And when others come here, he drives them insane or splits their hearts or grabs them by the feet and hurls them across the Ganges River." And the Buddha is completely undeterred and says, "I know. But if it won't be burdensome for you, I would like to spend one night here." The doorkeeper says, "It will not be burdensome for me, but if I allow you to stay here without informing him, he may kill me. So let me inform him." So the doorkeeper left and to talk with Alavaka. So I don't know how ogres travel. I don't know if a doorkeeper was, or I don't know how this works, but somehow he goes to wherever Alavaka is to say, "The Buddha is at your place." So while this is happening, the Buddha enters Alavaka's house or mansion or whatever his abode is, and he sits down and gives a Dharma talk to the people that are there. So apparently they're maybe housekeeping, servant, I don't know who's there exactly. Gives a Dharma talk to them. And then when the doorkeeper meets where Alavaka says, he rushed back to his home in a fury and demanded that the Blessed One leave. So that's all this colorful black backstory. Now we're getting to what actually happened, what's in the suttas, what's in the earlier strata. This is in the sutta, and it starts, "Thus have I heard." For those of you who are new to this, very often suttas, discourses start with this, "Thus have I heard." This is kind of bringing to mind the idea that this was the Buddha speaking, and somebody remembered what he was speaking, and so thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Alavi, the haunt of the Yucca Alavaka. Then the Yucca Alavaka approached the Blessed One and said to him, "Get out!" "All right," the Blessed One said, and he went out. "Come in!" "All right," the Blessed One said, and went in. And the second time the Yucca Alavaka said, "Get out!" "All right," so the Buddha walks out. "Get in!" "All right," so the Buddha comes in. A third time, "Get out!" Okay, he walks out. Get in! So the Buddha goes back in. So the kind of the backstory to this, like why Alavaka is doing this and why the Buddha is allowing himself to do, why he's doing this, is because Alavaka wants to make the Buddha angry, because he has learned that the Buddha is abides in loving kindness, and as long as he has loving kindness, he's immune to those weapons that Alavaka might have. So he wants to get him angry so that he will no longer have loving kindness. And the Buddha has this idea why he is following Alavaka's demands is because he knew that it was not possible to train a stubborn person with stubbornness. It's true, right? We kind of even know this in our own lives. You can't train a stubborn person with stubbornness. In fact, there's a few teachings about this that the Buddha gives, that you can't teach somebody about ethical behavior to an unethical person. And there's a thing, and you can't teach faith or confidence to somebody who doesn't have faith or confidence. So this is kind of really interesting. It makes, from me, when I heard this, I really thought about this public discourse. And then I also thought, well, then how does this work? How can you teach, or how can people learn if they're stubborn, or how can they learn if they don't have confidence or don't have ethical behavior? Turns out that the answer is in the timing. Like if somebody is unethical, but then you want to support them behaving in an ethical way, you only talk about ethical stuff when they are already being ethical. Because people aren't unethical 100% of the time. And this makes sense to me. Kind of like the burden is on the one who wants to help, or the teacher, is to be sensitive to what's happening to the other person. And if you're sincere and really want to help and support somebody, then you need to be attuned to where they are and to recognize when is the right time to say something, when is the right time to share some wisdom you might have or some ideas that you might have. Because it's not always the right time. And we know this. Like, if I'm stubborn, right, am I particularly stubborn? No, I'm not a particularly stubborn person. But I know that if somebody's like really pushing me, then there is a part of me that just doesn't like to be pushed around. And so, I tend to be like, wait, what's happening here? So we all have this experience. Okay, so 3 times Alavaka tells the Buddha, get out, come in, get out, come in. And then the 4th time, Alavaka says, get out. And the Buddha says, I won't go out. Do whatever you have to do. So the Buddha's kind of saying, I don't care what you're doing, I'm not going out anymore. And then Alavaka asks the Buddha some questions. He says, I'll ask you a question, and if you don't answer me, I'll drive you insane, or I'll split your heart, or I'll grab you by the feet and hurl you across the Ganges River. None of those sound really good, right? Drive you insane, split your heart, or get thrown across the river. And the Buddha replies, this is Diana's commentary, like, I don't see anyone in this world who could drive me insane, split my heart, or grab me by the feet and hurl me across the Ganges. But ask whatever you want. So, the Buddha, he's not threatened. Of course he's not threatened. But I love this. I've been thinking about this recently in a number of different settings, different teachings I've been giving in some different places. This idea, what would we do if the Buddha said, ask whatever you want? Like, what would you ask? What are some of their questions that we feel like that if we knew the answer would really make a difference? And what are some of the questions that we consider that the Buddha could ask? Ask whatever you want. So here's Alavaka's question, which turns out to be 4 questions. Alavaka asks, what is a person's best treasure? What, practiced well, brings happiness? What is the sweetest of tastes? Living in what way is one's life called the best? So this first one, what is a person's best treasure? So treasure, we might think of something that we value, something that is maybe like a resource, and something about treasures, like maybe even hidden, or maybe something that's not obvious, or it could also be something obvious like wealth or possessions or something like this. But Alavaka is asking, what is a person's best treasure? This is an interesting question, because I think society right now wants us to tells us all these things. What is the best treasure? If you behave this way, look this way, your bank account is this way, you live in this live in this location, drive this car, or whatever it is, right? We're being sent this message all this time about what makes a person valuable, or the most valuable thing that they have, or something. What is a person's best treasure? And for me, I kind of think, it really humanizes this ogre, right? He's concerned about wealth and security, just like humans. So then the second question, what well practiced brings happiness? So I appreciate that Alavaka is asking, well practiced brings happiness. What well practiced brings happiness? So he's recognizing that it's not something that you can just get by snapping your fingers. It's something that requires practice. So Alavaka recognizes that happiness isn't something that just magically gets bestowed upon a person, but what can we do? What can we practice? What can we cultivate and develop that's going to bring happiness? And maybe we can also say ogres just want to be happy, just like humans, right? So this way, but this idea that happiness doesn't necessarily come from things that are easily acquired. But maybe it takes some effort for some happiness that's maybe more enduring or deeper or more than just fleeting or superficial. The third question that Alavaka asks is, what is the sweetest of tastes? Maybe referring to a little bit of experiencing pleasure. Taste, we might understand here like taste to mean experience, and this word right now, it just rasa, can be understood sometimes as experiences. So he's asking, what's the most pleasant thing? What is the sweetest of tastes? What's the most pleasant? And then the last question is, living in what way is one's life called the best? So how to live the best life? We ask ourselves this question too. We don't want to have a life filled with regret and remorse. We don't want to get to the end of our life and feel like, I wasn't a good life. Somehow I didn't reach my potential or didn't do what I thought was important or something like this. So for me, I appreciate that this ogre, he's just like us. He's concerned with wealth or security, happiness, pleasure, and living a good life. These are things I would say humans care about too. Chances are all of us in this room care about these things also. So the Buddha answers Alavaka's questions in a very straightforward way, clearly and unambiguously. And I appreciate this very much. Maybe I should have said this is all in verse, right? So, the English maybe is a little bit clunky. That's why the English feels a little bit clunky, is because it's written in verse. And then when it gets translated, it's clunky. It's clunky in Pali also. But so the Buddha gives 4 answers to 4 questions. So 1 answer for each question. Faith is a person's best treasure. Faith, sada, we could translate this as conviction or confidence. It doesn't have to be believing in the unbelievable or something like this. I'll unpack this a little bit, but faith. Faith is a person's best treasure. The Dharma, practiced well, brings happiness. Truth is the sweetest of tastes. And living with wisdom, one's life is called the best. So we might ask ourselves, okay, well, what does this mean exactly? Faith in what? And what is this Dharma, and what does it mean to practice the Dharma? And when he's talking about truth, does this mean like speaking truth or finding the truth, or what does that really mean? And if wisdom is important, like how does one gain wisdom, and what is wisdom, and how would we recognize it? So Alavaka asked, and the Buddha said, faith is a person's best treasure. We need a certain amount of confidence or conviction to even start any practice. We have to have this belief that's not completely, we don't have all the data in, that this is going to be a worthwhile use of our energy, worthwhile of our time, worthwhile of our resources. It requires a little bit of faith or confidence or conviction. Without that, we will never start a practice, right? Of course not. So it's part of, he's saying it's the best treasure, maybe because it's something that's kind of hidden like a treasure, but it's also, if you have the confidence, you can start all kinds of things. Not only just Dharma practice or Buddhist practice or a spiritual practice, but so many things in life, right? Just often require just a little bit of confidence to begin. And then when we put it down or it slips, then we just need a little bit of confidence just to pick it back up again. Without that confidence, we might fall into like, oh, I can never do it. This is too hard for me. Everybody else can do it. What's wrong with me? Or something like that. And we could just slip into inaction. So this confidence is the best treasure. And we also could say that in the same way that treasure could be like a type of wealth, and there's a way in which the type of wealth can reduce the suffering that's associated with poverty or hunger or not having a place to live. So there's a way that treasure can reduce suffering. It's not the only way that it reduces suffering. But there's a way in which also faith can reduce suffering because it has this, it supports practice. And some of you will know that it's one of the 5 faculties. I'm not going to go into this list of the 5 faculties, but it's one of 5 things that really support practice, is having this confidence or conviction. So faith is a person's best treasure. I'm using this word faith. Feel free to use confidence, conviction, whatever you want. You don't have to use the word faith. The Dharma, practiced well, brings happiness. So what does that mean? The Dharma. There's a few things. Maybe some of you know, right? It's the teachings of the Buddha. Practiced well. So we learn things from the teachings, and then more than just having an intellectual understanding, more than just memorizing all the lists, is there a way that we can put it to practice in our life? Is there a way that we can, embody it instead of just, I remember I've heard Gil say a few times, he had this expression, I don't know if he still says it, he used to say, nightstand Buddhists. He's talked about all these people that had all these books on the Buddhism and the Dharma on their nightstand. And they would read them, and that was sufficient for them. And he said that will take you, a certain distance, but really, you need to practice, put into your life what the teachings are, including meditation practice, ethical behavior, wisdom, these types of things. So the Dharma is the teachings of the Buddha. We also could kind of like summarize the Dharma as a path of practice. And many of you will know that Sila, Samadhi, Panya is kind of, we could summarize this path of practice. Sila, ethical behavior. Samadhi, mental development, meditation. Panya, wisdom, is seeing things clearly and how things really are as best we can, as opposed to allowing our ideas about things to obscure what's really happening. We could say that's part of wisdom. And so the Dharma, practiced well, brings happiness, because there's a way. It's not only that, ethical behavior brings happiness, it's the complete absence of remorse, of regret, this bliss of blamelessness. There's a certain amount of happiness to know that, like if you see the policeman walking up to your door, like, oh, you just know that they need something and you don't have to feel bad or something. Oh my gosh, why did they here? You're just like, oh, maybe I can help with a neighbor. Maybe there's a problem with the neighbors or something like this. And so, but also awakening, this complete liberation is described as the highest happiness. So the Dharma, practiced well, brings happiness. It brings more and more freedom and peace and ease into our lives. And I gave, past month or so, a number of talks about what is the Dharma. I'm not going to go through all of it now, but there's a way in which just aligning with or tuning into what's happening, that's kind of the Dharma as well. As having some clarity about what's actually happening, what's there. And then the last one, 1, 2, 3, the third one, truth is the sweetest of tastes. So what is the most delicious, or what is like the most delectable? What is the most something that's maybe unambiguously delicious? And we might say that truthful speech, but when it's done and when it's kind and given at the right time and is done in a way that's beneficial, kind of whether we are speaking it or whether we hear it, there's a way that it nourishes the mind in the way that food might, something that you're tasting might. Truthful speech allows the mind to kind of like calm, to be calm, right? Whenever we're thinking about telling a little white lie, or if we're planning to tell a little white lie, have you ever noticed how much planning goes into that? We have to like rehearse it over and over and over again if we're going to tell a white lie, or if somebody tells us something and we're not quite sure, is that true or not? Then we just kind of have this little agitation in the mind. Did they really mean that? But there's something when we speak the truth and we know others that are speaking the truth, there's something that's really calming about that. It's really not agitating at all, as opposed to, agitating. It's agitating even with little white lies. So this is something to, just for us to practice with, is noticing when is our speech agitating, trying to maybe say things that are stretching the truth, or or maybe going around the truth or something like this. But again, right, it's not truth just for truth's sake, because the truth can be hurtful also. Yes, you actually do look fat in that dress, right? So instead, we want to use it in a way that, I love you no matter what you're wearing. That's kind of the things that we say instead of, yeah, actually, that's not so great. Or we would say, blue really looks really good on you. I like blue. And so rather than the red dress they're wearing, or, I'm just making this up, but this, to say truth is really important, but truthful speech doesn't give us license to be rude or inappropriate. And it's a skill. It's definitely a skill to learn how to say things that are supportive and beneficial. But also, truth is the sweetest of tastes, because the taste of freedom, peace, ease is sweet also. No matter what degree of liberation, this putting down of burdens that we have experienced, there's something that's, has this flavor of sweet, as something that feels, our bodies, our biology, are through evolution, right? We like things that are sweet and want more. And it's the same experience. I'm touching into some of this peace and well-being that's possible with practice. So then the last one the Buddha says is, living with wisdom one's life is called the best. And then maybe I'll just say, after this, Alavaka's next question is, how does one gain wisdom? Because he wants to live his best life. And he asks a few other questions too, but for our purposes here, I'll just stick to these ones. And the Buddha responds, how does one gain wisdom? And maybe I'll just say a few words, like how might we understand what wisdom is? One part of wisdom is having behavior, just how we show up in the world. There's some real wisdom to that, how we treat ourselves, how we treat others, how behaving ethically, taking care of our minds and our bodies, taking care of others, taking care of our communities. This is part of wisdom. As well as, seeing the characteristics of everything. It's impermanent, it's unsatisfactory, and doesn't have an inherent essence. This part of wisdom is seeing this and understanding this. So Alavaka asks, well, how does one gain wisdom? So, and the Buddha responds, by placing faith in the Dharma of the awakened ones, and from a desire to learn, one gains wisdom if one is diligent and astute. So we can see that he's kind of referring back to what he was saying earlier. One gains wisdom by placing faith in the teachings of the awakened ones. So, having enough confidence that you're willing to think about it or consider it and maybe put it into practice. And from a desire to learn, there can be a way, right, in which there's a certain arrogance, like I know this, I don't need to learn that. But having a desire to learn is this curiosity, this openness, like, oh yeah, is there something for me to learn here? Well, what is it that I don't quite see clearly or I don't understand, that my life keeps on turning out a way that I don't quite want it to? Is there something that I don't understand? From a desire to learn, one gains wisdom if one is diligent and astute. So it is a practice. We do have to practice. I wish, right, I think all of us wish that it were easy and fast and turn our life around, or even have our life continue to go the way that we want it to go, or whatever it is. But It is a practice. So, one last thing that I'd like to say here actually is that it's not an accident, the order that these questions are in. So it's part of the way that these things get, preserved or written or composed. That these four qualities are not only answers to Alavika's questions, these qualities of faith. I am reading two things at once. Faith, the Dharma well practiced. Truth is the sweetest of tastes, and wisdom. They're part of a sequence. The sequence of practice. That it begins with having enough confidence to begin, then practicing the Dharma, having a commitment to the truth. And in this way we might understand the truth as in, sometimes we might think of like mindfulness as the truth. Okay, what's really happening here? Even if it's uncomfortable to see, even if it's actually an uncomfortable experience, but like if the understanding that we gain about ourselves can be uncomfortable to learn things about ourselves, it can be hard. And then live with wisdom. So faith, practicing the Dharma, having a commitment to truth, and living with wisdom. And it kind of goes in that direction. It's not perfectly linear. We'll have a little bit of four altogether, but that is kind of like the path of practice, maybe in a nutshell, that the Buddha's teaching to Alavika, the Yaka, Alavika of Alavi, the Yaka Alavika of Alavi. Faith, practicing the Dharma, having a commitment to truth, and living with wisdom. So I'll end there, and I'll open it up to see, are there some comments or questions about this? And as I was talking, I was thinking like, oh, yes. And you know what? I don't think I have it in this version of the notes. The question is, well, what happened to Alavika after he heard all that, right? Right? That's like such an obvious question. And I don't have the quote here, but how it ends is that Alavika decides, he becomes a follower of the Buddha, and then he decides he's going to go teach all the other ogres about the Dharma. So there we go. So I don't know if he becomes awakened or what, I don't know, but maybe.
Did he at least change his diet?
It changes diet. Was he eating humans? I don't know if he was actually eating humans, right? Because he was throwing them across the river or making them insane or splitting their heart or something like this, right? So, yeah, there's another sutta where an ogre does eat humans, but I don't think this one does. I know it's kind of right. See, you guys are laughing and smiling. This is partly why I like this, because it has a little bit of whimsy to it. But I'd like to open it up if there's any questions or comments. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. So at first, when I heard this, I thought, oh, these are universal principles, but they also sound very like Western. I feel like everybody is chasing some kind of happiness or wisdom and truth and whatnot. But I was like, oh, it's still relevant today. So I don't know if it's progress or sort of sitting idle, but it was nice to hear.
Yeah, this is part of the reason why I like it too, is because, oh yeah, I can relate to this. Mm-hmm. We all want these things. And even though it's couched in this kind of funny story and from thousands of years ago, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like myself 10 or 20 years ago, I could still relate to it then and now. And yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, just a comment. I was super surprised that the Buddha said faith. I thought he would say love or compassion or something like that for human's greatest treasure. So that was just like a surprise for me.
Nice, thank you. Maybe I will say that this word faith, sada, shows up in all kinds of lists. Lots of lists that you haven't really heard Dharma teachers talk about. There's many of them. And here's an interesting thing about faith. that, as I said, it shows up in lots of lists, and just like it does in this list, it's always the first. And almost always, wisdom is the last. And there's all kinds of different things in between. So it's this movement of faith towards wisdom, which leads to freedom. So there's just this idea of a path, maybe is kind of so maybe it's like the kernel that starts everything before the love and the compassion maybe can arise. It has to start with just thinking that it's possible. Maybe you just start thinking that it's possible to have love and compassion and wisdom.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have a question or? Oh, sorry, yeah. I think Lydia also has it, and so maybe Lydia and then Bill.
Thank you. I'll make it fast, Bill. Thank you, Diana. So when you were talking about all these 4 questions raised by Yaka, I don't know how to link the first one, but to me, practice Dharma is to know the truth. And to gain the wisdom is to know the truth also. And it's practicing Dharma. So all these 3, because to me the wisdom of the Buddhism seems like that 3 characteristics you were talking about. And they're so tightly linked. But I'm not sure about the faith, like you said, seems to have to be the seed. And then, one step at a time from there.
And maybe he talked about faith because he was talking to an ogre. Maybe he started there, right? Okay, we have to start, with a simple, what's, the first step. You might think about that. But I appreciate truth, Dharma, wisdom, right? They kind of, they're all linked.
So I'm not quite understand what's an ogre mean.
Oh, a troll, like somebody that lives under, an ogre is like a monster, I don't know, does anybody have what's a good word for an ogre? Shrek?
Now I understand. Shrek. Thank you.
Shrek, thank you. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Orc.
Orc.
Well, I didn't start with faith. I started with sort of desperation. Like, there's got to be some way to be happy. I haven't tried this yet. What have I got to lose, right? But then
maybe it's just this. There had to be a tiny little bit of faith in order for you to come back this second time.
well, it just worked.
Okay, so so your faith wasn't completely because you had no data, right? You had something like, oh yeah, it worked. I'm going to keep on coming back. But still, the faith to think like, okay, it can continue to work.
Well, yeah, it was just sort of like evidence, though. Like,
Yeah, there we go. That's the word I'm looking for. Evidence. You had evidence. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And that's exactly what we're being asked to do. We're not asked to just believe.
Blind faith.
Yeah. That.
Although, in however hazy and unformed and ill-defined a manner, I did always have this idea that it was somehow important for us, for each person, to try to become a better person and go as far with that as you could. And that it was also somehow important for all people to try to form a better society.
Yeah.
And where that came from, Don't know. Still don't know. Maybe there's a little bit of a faith element in that, and kind of an innate feeling that this is important. Does that sound like faith, or does it sound like something else?
Sounds like maybe it's that you have faith in the human capacity, or to
No, in that it's important
that it's important.
somehow. And whether this importance is something we're making up or is out there somewhere, don't know. But that if there's such thing as a purpose in life, some reason for us to be here, that's it. Does that sound like something different than
Yeah,
faith?
that sounds a little bit different.
A little woo-woo.
I think what's being pointed here, I like this
Kinda
word
cosmic.
evidence, like this idea of like, okay, I have this makes sense to me, and I have a little bit of evidence that this is going to work, and therefore I'm going to continue. That's kind of what that's being pointed to here.
I have two more questions, but they're really brief. One is, which sutta is this? And secondly, where do you find these commentaries? I have never seen them anywhere.
Yeah. So this is Sutta Nipata 110. Sutta Nipata
Yes, that one.
110. And the commentary to the Sutta Nipata is the only commentary that I know of that is translated into English. So that's why you haven't seen them, is because they're just not there. They just don't, they're not. in
Oh, they're still
English.
not translated.
That's right.
Oh, where do you find them?
Well,
Holly?
this commentary is translated. This is the only one. Have you seen like Bhikkhu Bodhi? He has this, the Sutta Nipata is like literally like 4 inches thick.
I've got
And the actual sutta is like, quarter inch, and the commentary is 3
Oh,
and
yes,
some odd
Sutta
inches.
Nipata. Yes. That does have the commentary.
Yes, and the commentary is huge.
Yes,
So
okay.
there's crazy stories in there.
I haven't read them yet. Now I want to. Thank you,
I'm using
Diana.
this word crazy. They're playful and fun. I think that